What's up, everyone, and welcome back. It is season 2 of the Real Ones Canes podcast. He is Brandon O'Doy. Follow him at Brandon_O'Doy. I'm the Beast, Brian London. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast. Follow the show at Real Ones Canes. And Brandon, we are in August, which means we are done summering, as you called it. We are back on the grind with these Miami Hurricanes as they get set to take on pretty tough schedule here in 2024. Camp has started, and I haven't gotten a chance to get down there yet. I was dealing with some stuff at home, but you had a chance to get down to Media Day, and just wanted to get your thoughts. What was it like being back down there and getting around those guys?
Yeah, not much different than most other media days we've had. You know, the offense comes out, defense comes out, the assistant coaches come out. There's optimism around the program. You look at the bodies. That's your first real good chance to look at the bodies and see how they've been transformed. These transfer portal guys are big human beings. The young man, Tyler Barrow, I mean, he's an impressive size dude. I mean, and I say this, I never even actually saw him standing up, just sitting down, looking at the size of his legs. And, you know, this is what a team that is aspiring to play at the highest level has to look like, especially on the defensive front. And so you heard all the things, Media Day. There's usually a theme. It was one day at a time. That's the thing I heard multiple people say. I mean, you could tell that was the messaging last year. It was, I forget what it was, but everybody kept saying it. You see some leadership. You see some people emerging, you know, the young man, Powell from Washington seems to be,
Powell. Yeah.
Up. He seems to be, you know, a leader on that back end. And, you know, you've got, you know, some guys up front, and Cam Ward's unquestionable leader. I think Ruben Baines, a lot of interest in talking to him. It's just a team that, there's no shortage of talent. The question becomes, you know, what's this team gonna become? And I talked to a couple of coaches, assistant coaches, and they said, you know, we'll know by the end of camp, you know, how special this team can be. And that's kind of, you know, what we're looking forward to, you know, to see, because they're going to be the biggest indication. And I asked Powell, I said, man, look, you were on a championship team. You started, you were in that locker room. You know what it takes to get to the last game, came up a little short. Does this team give you championship vibes? And he said, yes, it does. And that's probably the biggest takeaway for me, Beast, which is you have a guy that's been there and done that. And, he seems to think that it's possible. I mean, he's been around an elite quarterback, a guy who was drafted in the first round in the top 15 picks or so. And he understands, you know, what it's like from a leadership perspective on both sides of the ball. He just lived it. And so I took that from him to mean kind of a fair amount because I'm not sure he would say that if it wasn't really true. And then the other piece that I took away was that we had guys looking a lot more confident. There's a real sense of brotherhood. It seems like that was another one of the themes. Guys genuinely like each other, hanging around, inviting each other to watch film. It just kind of shows you how far this program has really had to come, that, you know, like there's more film watching going on now than there ever was before. And you got guys saying, you know, it's a completely unrecognizable program based on 1 or 2 years ago. So those are interesting comments. You know, I don't read too much into talking season because that's all there is to do right now is to talk. And,
true.
You know, on the 31st, it kind of all, the cat kind of sleeps out of the bag, and we'll see, you know, what's really going on behind the scenes. So that's what we have to look forward to.
And the bottom line, and we know this every year, it's all talk, it's all fun and games until you get hit in the mouth for the first time against an opponent in their stadium that's going to happen on August 31st. You talk about Mish Powell. I did get a chance to listen to everything that every player has said and read everything, and I've been dialing up on everything. And, Mish Powell, when they asked him, hey, you mentioned he went with Washington, the college football playoff. He said, how's this team compared to that team? He said, it's like looking in a mirror. The one thing he did say is, you got to be disciplined. It's not just talent. It's not just about, all the stars and all the talent that's there. You got to be disciplined as a team to make it that far. And that was kind of his question. He's like, do these guys understand about the little things that have to be done, the discipline that it takes to have that kind of a season? And I think Mario Cristobal put it best when he gave his first address of the season after the first practice. He said, we can't coach them soft and expect them to play hard. I think we already know that Mario's kind of maniacal when it comes to getting on these guys. I think it's going to be even ramped up a little bit because of the talent that they know that they have, right? You gotta bring the coaching up to the level to meet the talent. And Brandon, we've talked about it all last season. Their talent acquisition, whether it be recruiting or transfer portal, has been outstanding. I mean, you talked about the kid Barron, but we talked about the kids from Louisville, Marshall, Washington, Oregon State, Damian Martinez coming in, Houston with Sam Brown. They have gone out and gotten what they thought they needed in the transfer portal, and then their recruiting has been unbelievable. I mean, they're talking about, a kid like Justin Scott being a instant factor for this team. So the talent's there, but they gotta rise to that level. That's my impression. What are your thoughts?
Agreed. I mean, and back to Powell, he did indicate that with me and my conversation with him, because when he said that discipline comment, it made me think about how many times they should have lost, but they didn't. And that's right. What disciplined teams do. It's like they win games they probably shouldn't because they do the right things the longest time, and eventually the game comes back to them. And so the Hurricanes have never been accused of being a disciplined team in my tenure here in South Florida covering them. I think the year that they had the most success, it was, a lot of the things they didn't do well were camouflaged by the fact that they were turning the ball over at a rate that has not really been seen in quite right. some time. And so the very next year when they were not turning the ball over like that, they were abysmal. And so it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, if the coaching level is truly rising, will the coaching be accepted? And will the players hold themselves accountable and play discipline? Will you see the jumping off sides? Will you see the, 12 men on the fields? Will you see the breakdowns in coverage? Will you see the things that are indicative of teams that are not prepared, that are not practicing hard, that are not following a process? Because it is a long season and it's hard to be good for 12 to 17 games. He said 17 games. That's what it takes. That's what it's going to take to win the college football playoff. I mean, that's a lot of time. It's hard for me to be good for 5 days and go to the gym 5 days right. throughout the week, let alone 17 games that are 3+ hours long, that are behind practices, and you just don't feel well. And that's the thing. I talked to one of the offensive line coaches, Ed Pata, and, he and I were basically chatting offline, but essentially he was saying you never feel 100% on the O-line. And it's about how tough can you be when you're not feeling 100%. And so, it's one of those situations where this Hurricane team has to establish an identity. It has to happen quickly. This is not an easy game up in Gainesville on the 31st. There's a lot of people up there who want nothing more than to ruin the Hurricanes opening game. They have all these expectations. The Gators have almost no expectations. Matter of fact, the expectation is more so the opposite. the storylines are amazing. It's a shame this game isn't being played in prime time because whoever gave this up to the 3:30 slot must not have had a clue about ratings and storylines and how that works. How you can tell me Notre Dame and Texas A&M have more storylines than Florida and Miami with, two coaches that kind of have to produce right now, two fan bases that absolutely cannot stand each other, a 4 to 5 hour drive between programs, a game that was played just a few years ago that Miami lost. And it just, there are going to be so many things going on in that game. And even in your house is a microcosm of this whole situation. You being a University of Miami grad, your wife being a Florida Gator, like there's a million situations that are similar to that in South Florida where, Canes are married to Gators. And it's just, this is a big rivalry. This is a problem.
Yeah.
This is no doubt. A small game at all. And I think the losing coach is in a lot of trouble. And, it's just going to be interesting to see.
There's definitely a lot on the line. Before we get to the stakes of that game, I want to pull it back, if you don't mind, to talk about the offensive line, because all I heard the offseason, but definitely in listening to Mario this week and listening to the players this week, they really believe it is in the trenches where this team is championship caliber, both on the offensive and defensive side of the football. But on the offensive side, you talk about bringing in, arguably the top center in the transfer portal and Zach Carpenter, and then you surround him on that line with Maui Noah, with Jalen Rivers, who is an extraordinary young man. He's as, you can tell he's a fifth-year player, right? He's as mature and amazing as they come. You talk about Cooper being there, and then, you talk about McCoy being a possible, guard, or Okunlula. But I think they've got depth there too at the offensive line. That's important. And then you look on the other side of the football, with Ruben Bain, and you get Mesidor back, and you put a bunch of other guys in that they've gotten through the portal. It's the trenches. I know it's cliche to say, but you really got to be strong there. And when I say strong, you mean like actually strong. Like you have to be men there. You've had a chance over the course of the last, 6 months to be around a bunch of different college campuses, and you've seen what programs have up front. It is big, biscuit-eating mother bleepers playing in the trenches.
Yeah, it's not a game for, the faint of heart. When you look at the bodies that walk around a Georgia, an Alabama, just some of the programs that I've been to this offseason, even Georgia State, walking in with the 20 plus, 30 plus guys they flipped on the roster because they hired an SEC coach. You look at absolute grown men, and these are not regular size humans. These are freakish, oversized, long arm, long, hands. These guys look like abnormal folks that are completely normal. They're just bigger and larger than life. And these teams have put together a lot of guys that look similar. And it's for the first time, Miami has bodies and guys that look similar to some of the other places I've been to. You walk into Georgia and literally the smallest guy on the offensive line is 6'5", 6'4". And that's real life. And they average about 6'6" across the board. They have a couple of guys that are 6'7", 6'8", and 6'9", and this is how they, normally operate, and these defensive tackles are 6'5", and, the Jordan kid that was around a few years ago, I saw him up close. He looks just like utterly, superhuman. So when you have, situations like that, it makes it kind of tough to have success when you don't have the bodies to go back and forth. You look at a guy like Ruben Bain, who's had a ton of success. For all intents and purposes, he's 6'2" and some change, and 200 and whatever pounds. He's not that big. He's just strong as an ox, and he has the determination that's out of this world, and his technique is really, really good. But
he works his butt off.
That's what I'm saying. He has a work ethic that matched with technique that kind of takes him to another level. But here's the thing. He's probably going to be the smallest guy on this D line. And like that wouldn't have been the case 3, 4, 5 years ago. I mean, there are dudes on that line. And I'm telling you, these dudes, these transfer portal guys, yeah, they're worth every penny they got paid, because I'm telling you, they look the part. Now, whether they play the part is another conversation, and we'll find that out in just about a month or so from now. But they look the part, Beast, I'm telling you. And, you know, it comes down to Cam Ward. The lights are obviously not too bright. He's the one everybody wants to talk to. You know, you saw him getting pulled aside for one-on-ones with all the local media and the Channel 6s and the Channel 10s of the world and the podcast and, you know, all the little things he's doing. And he just handled it with grace. You know, one of the things that I thought was interesting is Restrepo's not one of the biggest, you know, sort of sought after. I mean, he's still, you know, commanded, but it's like that's how much more talent has been added to this roster, that Xavier Restrepo isn't the face of the offense anymore. You know what I mean? Which some people can argue, how was he ever the face of a Miami offense? But that's where we are now. We're at the point where one of the better players, you know what I mean, it is kind of just another guy in the system, you know? So it's like, this is a college football team that has a lot of excitement. And I don't know if you noticed this, Beast, this national media crowd is starting to tilt their fans or sales in the direction of the Miami Hurricanes in consideration to what they might do this year.
You know, I was actually thinking about that, and for better or for worse, Brandon, I think a lot of that has to do with CFB 25, man. You know, that game is out. People are starting to play. Yeah, my son's already on like the 27th year of his dynasty. I started my dynasty. I started with the University of Buffalo. I'm working my way up, but my son and I have played. Yeah, my son and I have played a couple games using the University of Miami, and you know, I know a couple of the guys are a little upset about the rating and what have you, but you can tell, you know what, Cam Ward can play in that game. These guys can, Sam Brown, some of these receivers can play in that game, and I think some of the national media are like, oh, okay, and that's kind of where it's coming from. But you know, in listening to Cam Ward speak, man, the one thing I love about him, look, we know he's talented. We know he's freaking smart as heck. He knows football. He's a film dog. He's already taken the offensive line out 1,000,000 times. He knows what he's doing. The one thing I love about him, he's freaking honest. The first day of practice, he said, offense wasn't good enough. The defense beat us this day. We didn't do this right. We didn't do that right. We were good, but we weren't great. We need to be great. Like, his honesty came through. Like, this was not coach speak. This was not like, I'm just going to feed you a bunch of lines. This was honesty. Like, hey, no, I didn't come here to just be good. Like, we're going to get after it.
And that's the thing that I like about him, because that Beast, when you're coveted like he is, he has an authority based on how he's being taken care of to be a Miami Hurricane that a lot of other players couldn't have. And it's like, he's stepping up in a way that is unique. And we just haven't seen a leader at the quarterback position in quite some time just grab the team. I mean, I've already heard like 10 stories of him grabbing guys, throwing out the practice, going out to eat, doing extra things. And then you see the stuff with him and Shador on social media, how he's kind of challenging Shador, which is like really something no one does, not even his father. No. You know what I mean? So, I mean, this is a different type of human being. And you just can't wait to sort of see it all. I'm trying to keep the, you know, excitement level down because it just doesn't even matter. It's just like every other year. Like literally, only thing that matters is wins and losses. And I hate to be so callous, but you know, this is a results business, Beast. If you're not elite, you're just another team. You're going to have tons of kids opting out of the bowl game. And it's just like, go ahead and try to figure it out in recruiting and try again next year, because, hey, man, it's about making that 12. It's first things first. You got to get into the ACC championship, which you haven't been to in quite some time. FSU's got a lot of things to figure out. Clemson is coming off of one of their worst years in a generation. And, you know, there's sort of, you know, new tides going on all over the place. UNC is reconstructing. North Carolina State's got to figure some things out on offense with new quarterbacks. They got to see if they have enough talent to be really successful. You know what I mean? The conference seems up for grabbish. The new additions don't seem to pose that big of a threat, and SMU maybe being the most ready to do that, especially with a very aspirational and hungry coach of, Rhett Lashlee, who spent time in Miami. Duke doesn't seem ready, even though they've got some really good pieces, particularly in the quarterback room. Wake has taken steps back in years past. Cal and Stanford are happy to be in the ACC and not wandering around. It just seems like all of the stars sort of, I don't want to say they're aligned.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
But they are collaborating and talking and Zooming, and they are text messaging each other and reacquainting themselves.
The stars are communicating. I like that.
And they are communicating. Yeah. The stars are communicating. I am willing to say the stars are communicating right now.
So I heard a quote, right? They were interviewing Wesley Bissaith, who, again, has matured immensely since he's been here. He's really come into his own. And 20 years ago, if I heard this quote, I would have pounded my chest and be like, yeah. 10 years ago, if I heard this quote, I'd have been like, oh, no, you didn't say that. And now I don't know how to feel. And it was a tiny little thing. I don't know if anyone else picked up on it. And I quote, he said, me and Kiko, with what we are about to do, there's going to be some problems. It was as confident as I've heard a Miami Hurricane in a while. And I was like, kind of like the Alonzo Mourning GIF when he's like, he's like, yeah, like exactly. that one, like, I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, all right, I think I like it. Wait, but are we there yet? I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know what's happening.
Well, Beast, you know better than anybody. That's how Hurricanes used to talk. That's right. How Alonzo Highsmiths and, your Warren Sapps, your Michael Irvins, those guys had no problems telling you what was coming, and they backed it up. Now, and, I've known Wesley since he was in 6th grade. Listen, he's been a really good player for a very long time. I think the learning curve is over. This will be the first year he probably plays, at a speed that you're used to. You got to think about it. Year 1, they used him in packages. Year 2, he played basically full time. And this is coming back for full time year 3. So imagine where Kiko was last year, basically as an established player, and where he is now. And then everybody gets to come back in the same defense and offense. We haven't talked a lot about that, Beast.
No.
Everybody comes back for the first time under Mario Cristobal in the same offense. And
there's something to be said for that.
And there's a lot to be said for that. But you can go back 3-4 seasons. That's not been the case. You know what I'm saying? There's been change every single time. So if you're a 4-year, 5th-year guy in this program, this is the first time this has ever happened to you. This is the first time you've ever seen that.
And Mario brought up a good point about that because he was asked that after the first practice. And he said, obviously, your consistency and all of that stuff in the install and being able to, it's easier to install when you're just teaching the new guy, whatever. But the thing where it really shows is in the past, the older guys really haven't been able to help the younger guys because they're learning too. But now,
the same pace.
But now the older guys know the systems on both sides, and they're able to help out coaching the younger guys because they already know the system. They're not learning it at the same time.
And you know what that allows you to do? And one of the coaches brought this up during media day. That now allows you to take the next step. Right. Because I asked, the nickel kid, the one that came from Marshall, I said, well, okay, you had Guidry, who he reminded me, I forgot that he had Guidry. I said, you had, Jackson. He said, yeah, I had Guidry too. And I said, is it the same thing? He said, yeah, for the most part, it's exactly the same. I said, well, what are the differences? I said, do you expect to see new wrinkles and to see new things? He's like, Yeah, well, the thing is, the more people know, the more he can add and the more he can be complex. And so this is coming from a guy who
De'Ani Hill, right?
Yeah, Hill. I said nickel, but it's Hill.
Yeah.
This is a guy that, has been in this system. So imagine him coming in. It's his first year, but even he as a new guy is coming in and having a much greater appreciation for what's already taking place. And then, the positions where guys are coming in that don't really know what they're doing because they're new, you can be new at defensive line where really you just got to get to the ball. And, there probably aren't as many nuances as there is in the back end and at linebacker where you bring back your starting guys. You know what I mean? You're going to have a new guy that plays this sort of defensive end, drop back into coverage role. That guy's going to be new, but for the most part, your Will and Mike linebackers are going to be the same. And you've got Jaden Harris, who played a lot of football last year behind Cam and James, so he's not brand new. And your corners with Brown and Porter, not only did they play at the same high school, and they played together last year, and they both come back. So there's a lot to kind of be interested in as far as continuity wise. Like I said, the stars are in the group chat having conversations, and that's, I think, pretty fair to say.
Yeah. So one thing I want to get to, and we'll do this after the break, is the expectations. Because they're going up, like you said. And we'll talk about what the expectations are, what's realistic, what we think. We'll do that on the other side. Hey, hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to this. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that subscribe button, hit the like button, the thumbs up, the bell, all of that stuff. You're listening to the Real Ones Canes podcast. We'll be back on the other side. Welcome back to the Real Ones Canes podcast. He is Brandon O'Doy, bringing it strong at Brandon_O'Doy. I'm the Beast, Brian London. I bring it not so strong, but every once in a while at Miami Radio Beast. Hey, do us a favor, subscribe to the podcast and hit up the YouTube channel. We really would appreciate that. Brandon, we got to talk about expectations. This team, the Miami Hurricanes, picked by over 100 journalists that cover the ACC to finish third in the ACC. I thought that was fair, although I do have some questions about Florida State. I do have questions about Clemson. I have questions about the University of Miami. Like you said, the ACC is kind of, maybe up for grabs. So when you saw that the Hurricanes were predicted to finish third, your thoughts were what?
Great, because every year they pick them to finish first or the top of the coastal, what used to be the coastal, and they would underperform. So great. You put the Blue Bloods first, the guys who've been performing at a high level, Florida State and Clemson, they've been carrying the conference. And then you see Miami in that third spot. So to me, that's a nod to there's talent on this team. But we can't put you in front of Clemson and Florida State, who's coming off a perfect season, where they only lost a bowl game because of all the opt-outs and just everything kind of being disappointed about not getting in the college football playoff. I'm fine with it. I think it's a respectful place to be, and I think it's realistic, but you better not finish third. I think you have to, if you're Mario Cristobal, I think you have to play for an ACC championship. I'm not saying you got to win it, but you definitely need to be in that game with all this talent.
So let's remind the audience that because they got rid of the divisions and there's 17 teams in the conference now.
That's ridiculous.
For now, until the thing blows up. The top two teams, the two best records, will play at the ACC title game. And,
right.
So it's not like Miami can look at a coastal division and be like, okay, yeah, we could just fly through this and head to Charlotte to go play in the championship game. No, you gotta play your whole conference schedule. There's no divisions anymore.
Well, and the thing and not to cut you off, I think the biggest problem with that is you don't play both Clemson and Florida State. So that makes the Florida State game all the more important because they're competing, and I only think a few teams are competing to actually win this. So games against NC State, which I don't think Miami plays this year, games against Florida State, Clemson, for any program in Miami are going to be the games that you've got to be, very specific to win, because that will keep them from, jumping ahead of you in tiebreaker scenarios.
We talk about that Florida game being a must win, and it is, right? Like, for both coaches, I think the pressure. I think there's way more pressure on Florida than there is Miami to win that game at home. But
sure,
you need to win the games in your conference, and that Florida State game being at home on October 26th is just absolutely huge. You have to win that game, Brandon. You have to win that game at home on October 26th.
If you don't win that game, you got to win every other game you play. I think that's kind of the fairness. I don't like to say there are must-win games. I just think in a scenario where you don't win every other game, you have to win that. You have to win that one. If you plan on dropping that game, you've got to win every other game you play. Which is why the first game becomes the most important game, because if you drop that game, now everything's a must-win as far as what you are trying to accomplish for the season, because now it doesn't affect you in the ACC race, but, now the pressure will be on by losing in-state to Florida and Florida State. That affects you in recruiting. That affects you. Like, there's a lot at stake this season with this schedule.
And listen, I get the whole idea of moving towards a bigger playoff and all that stuff, but you know what? That only means you're still having to deal with the human element of voters, right? You don't want to leave anything to chance. Is I think what my point is. So you better win a lot in order to get yourself to where you want to go.
Best way to get into the 12-team playoff is to win your conference and only have one loss. I think that is for a P4 conference, that's a pretty safe bet to be locked and loaded. Anything beyond that, you're going to be in some trouble. We already know, without having to guess, what this country thinks about the ACC. It's not a very kind, disposition towards this league. So if you go into the season knowing that, I'm sure Mario Cristobal, the coach that he is telling people, like, hey, Florida State went out there and won every game, and they got kept out of a 4-teamer. You think you can lose more than one game and get into this thing? It ain't going to happen.
So look, a bunch of Miami Hurricanes are up for preseason or on the preseason award watch list. A bunch of guys are up for ACC first and second team and watch list. But Cam Ward is already looking like he's in the player of the year battle for the ACC, and he's never taken a snap in the conference, which to me was, I kind of chuckled a little bit because that's the state of college football right now, right? Like, normally the people that are up for that award, you've seen for 2 or 3 years playing in the conference. This will be his first year in the ACC, and he's already up for player of the year. But he seems like the kind of kid that embraces those things and does not shy away from that and isn't impacted by the pressure that kind of accolade brings to him.
You think about it, Beast. This is a kid that was going to the NFL draft. And he was going in a QB-heavy draft. He thinks highly of himself. I don't get arrogance from him, but he definitely thinks he can play football. So I don't think these accolades, especially these preseason lists that are pretty much meaningless, it basically means that you've got a fair team. You've got a pretty talented team. Your kicker's on the watch list for the Grozas. You've got, guys who are on, the watch list. One watch list I hadn't seen anybody on is for the receivers award, which University of Miami player has never won. And so at the end of the day, not to say that they aren't, I just haven't seen it. Probably Brown would be the person that if there was someone to be on, I believe, the Nagorski list, he would probably be the person.
No, Nagorski is a linebacker, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm all over the place, but the bottom line, we just had this conversation offline, which is funny. the bottom line is.
By the way, it's the Biletnikoff Award. You know why? I vote for it. I have a vote.
You have a vote?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. And the watch list doesn't include any Canes, right?
I have to look in my email. I'm sure I got it emailed to me.
But yeah, the point is, the lists are great, but they're just what's the only thing good about them is it's an indication that people think you have talent. That's it. And we're probably on more lists as Hurricanes this season than ever before. And so,
by the way, the watch list comes out August 7th. That's why you haven't seen any Canes on it yet.
Well, then there you go. Because I've been getting an email about a watch list pretty much every other day, and so
for sure.
I haven't seen. But maybe you'll get maybe you'll get two guys on it. I'm sure Restrepo will be on there.
Restrepo's going to be on it, and Brown should be on it. And I won't tell you where my votes are going to go at the end of the year, but I always try to, take care of the home team.
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's meaningful that you have talented guys being recognized before the season starts. It's just about cooking the sauce, man. Mario Cristobal, you've been handed an amazing bag of groceries. You need to go ahead and cook that up. And we're just going to sit back and we're going to wait to feast. And August 31st is our first course meal.
Hey, Brandon, you get a chance every once in a while to talk to some of the assistants and staff down there. Expanded staff. They've brought in more analysts. They brought in more people. Mario's getting what he needs in terms of support staff and support to have everything he needs to have the program he wants. That's what it seems like from the outside looking in.
Yeah. Their support. Good friend of mine, Frank Tucker, was just added to the staff. He's run the Crib South Florida for the last 3 or 4 years. Very tied to the high school population, the coaches here in South Florida. Is a very good hire in the sense of relationship building and bonding. I talked to Coach Cristobal offline, and he shared with me some very basic things that are not a part of the Canes database in the recruiting office because of things that just haven't been done that you just should have in any program, especially for your local South Florida high school football program. So he knew he identified a need. This is something he's been working on for about 6 months. And Tucker is just one of the guys that I know. There's several others with bigger titles and names that are, lost to me, but nevertheless, there's support. And what does that look like? Well, okay, when you sit down and you identify, hey, we want to go after a kid, you got a lot of people in the room and they all have tentacles, just like I'm holding up my hands. And these guys have to use their tentacles to reach out to these prospects, their coaches, maybe someone who taught them, maybe someone they play with, to get their information, to start having conversations, reaching out to moms and dads. Because sometimes this information is in scouting databases that universities pay for, and sometimes it's not. And so the more diverse and the larger your recruiting staff is, the better chance you have of beginning to bridge the gaps, to form relationships, and to put yourself in a position to succeed on the recruiting trail. But the biggest way to win on the recruiting trail is to win in between the white lines, my friend, and that will never change.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have seen in the past, right, that there's going to be kids from South Florida that are going to go to the University of Miami, regardless of what their record is, home team, all that stuff, protect the crib, all of that. But when it comes down to it, you're right. You win on the field, you start to win off the field, and that's how these things start to kind of get rolling down the hill, if you will. But you mentioned it with the staff and all the stuff. It's like any other business, Brandon. It's relationships. I mean, you see that every day with your 17 jobs. I see that every day. And Mario Cristobal knows that's the key to building a program.
Yeah, one thing that's not lost on Coach Cristobal is how to recruit. So you're in good hands, Miami Hurricanes fans, with a coach that prioritizes the bloodline of every program, the lifeblood of every program, recruiting. So the Hurricanes have been doing a wonderful job on that. And just to show you how important it is, Florida, who is not where they expect to be as a program, they're ranked number 50 right now in the recruiting rankings. Miami's top 10. So There you go.
Oof. Things could change. We got a long ways to go, but yeah, that's not good. All right, Brandon, listen, man, we're going to keep our ears to the ground. We're going to follow this camp, see how things end up. But listen, as I tell everyone, when they're running around in pajamas, it's not as important as when they're running around with their uniforms on against another team in another stadium, right? Like, we can, every day we're going to get reports. Oh, Naikar had a great catch, right? JoJo had a great catch. Justin Scott made this amazing play on defense. We're going to get all hyped up, right? And what's the bottom line is, hey, it's great out on Green Tree or in the practice facility, but it means a lot more on a Saturday, in Gainesville or somewhere else, right?
That's what it means. It's all about putting it together on the football field. And that's what we're looking forward to, my brother.
I'll be honest with you. The highlight of my day is when I saw some real positive stories about my boy, Elijah Arroyo, who, again, I'm going to tell you is probably going to be the MVP of the team this year. Elijah Arroyo. Count on it. Book it.
Okay. I feel like we need a wager on, like, over under how many snaps he takes. Like,
oh no, man, he's healthy. No. He's healthy, bro. He's healthy. This guy is gonna show out this year. I can't wait to sit next to you in the press box and look to my right and be like, I told you.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen.
We should end it right there.
Listen, all right. I hope he has a good season. I did talk to Cam McCormick. And he's looking forward to coming back. His second consecutive year for the first time. And, kind of humanized him for me. Everybody's calling him the old head. There's a lot of jokes. He's like, man, look, I came back from 4 surgeries. Like, I mean, it means something to me. So I said, I respect that,
there was actually a couple of good stories on Cam McCormick and just about his journey and what he's been through. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. No, he's an interesting guy, and I'm rooting for him. He had a pretty solid year, but he was ahead of Arroyo, so it'll be interesting to see if that changes. Lofton is the guy everybody's excited about.
His spring was unbelievable. Of course, Riley Williams coming back. So you know what? Hopefully they use the tight end this year. How about that? Let's just go with that.
I think you'll see. I mean, you got a quarterback, man. You got somebody back there that can do some things. So.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Come on.
Yeah, I know. I know what you're thinking.
Stay tuned, man.
All right, that'll do it for us this time. Follow Brandon at Brandon_O'Doy. Follow me at Miami Radio Beats. Follow the show at Real Ones Canes. Hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening and watching this. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time on the Real Ones Canes podcast. Peace.